All right, old school NBA fans, self-research, NBA facts. Got another video for you. As always, thanks to anybody who watches my videos, subscribes to my channel. I really appreciate it. This video here is one that I've heard many people in the comments say, media say, whatever. You know, Jordan's competition. And directly what I'm going to talk about is the Eastern Conference in the decade of the 90s. Okay, everybody who wants to bring Jordan down usually sticks to this, you know, the whole watered down thing, whatever. But I'm not even going to get into that. I'm just going to get into the conference. Now, if we're comparing the 90s East to the 2000s East or the 2010s East, it's not even close. The 90s East were much better. Now, to the 80s East, no, the 90s East was not as good as the 80s. However, what do you mean by better? Are you just talking about the very tippy top teams? Or are you talking about the conference from top to bottom? Better players? What do we mean when we say better? Are you just strictly talking about the very teams at the top that you have to beat in order to win a championship? Or are you talking about the season long, you know, game in, game out that you're going to have against these teams? So to me, it's completely different answers, really. Obviously, if you weren't the 70, and I did a video not long ago, if you weren't the 76ers or the Celtics, you were not winning the East from 1980 to 87. That's 8 years. Those two teams had the East locked down. Then Detroit locked it down for 3 years, from 88 through 90. So that's 11 years. If you were not one of those three teams, you were not going to go to the finals. If you were in the East, it just wasn't going to happen. Milwaukee was a really good team in the 80s. I mean, they had like a 60-win season, a 59, a 57, a 56, year after year. And one year, they actually beat Boston in the semifinals just to run into Philly and get beat. See what I'm saying? Got crushed, actually. That's what I'm saying. You just weren't going to beat Philly and Boston in the same run. It just wasn't going to happen. Nobody did it. And then if you somehow miraculously did, then you had to deal with the Lakers in the finals to beat all three of those teams. It was next to impossible. It just wasn't going to happen. But anyway, the 90s was not weak, like these people say. Was it as strong as the 80s? No. If we're comparing it to the 80s, no, it's not. Yeah, they did bring in a couple expansion teams, top to bottom, no. But here's where I push back, though. The 80s strength was basically those 2 to 3 teams. That's what it was from pretty much the whole decade. The late 80s started changing a little bit. Cleveland was moving up the ranks. The Bulls, Detroit, obviously it had changed, it opened it up a little bit. Boston was still a factor, even Philly to a certain extent, but there was other teams in it now because a lot of those guys, they got old, they retired, they went to other teams, whatever. So, looking at the 90s East, all right, we know about the expansion, 89 and 90 and all that, and that really doesn't affect a lot. As far as, you'll pick up a couple extra wins. That's really what it boiled down to. These teams weren't going to make the playoffs. They didn't make the playoffs when they weren't a team, so they're not going to make the playoffs now that they are a team. You added a couple, the expansion draft, I did a video on that, sucked away, very minor players. Like Rick Mahorn got taken off the 89 Pistons, and, how bad was it? Detroit won the championship the next year. B.J. Armstrong got sniped by Toronto in the 95 expansion draft. What did the 96 Bulls lose their point guard, B.J. Armstrong? So they gained, of course, Jordan and Rodman, but they won, 35 more games. They went from 47 wins to 72 wins and had the best season of all time. Yeah, I don't think B.J. Armstrong was that big of a factor. But anyway, so in 1990... the top 4 teams were the Pistons, 59 wins, Bulls, 55 wins, Boston, 53 wins, and Philly, 52 wins. That's your top 4 teams. Now, just looking at it like an average season or whatever, that's not bad. That's about what you'd expect, something like that. That's just kind of like average, whatever. The All-NBA players from the East were Charles Barkley, Jordan, and Ewing. Those 3 were first-team All-NBA. So 60% of the first team All-NBA was in the East. And then Bird made second and Dumars made third. Now, they had only 5 of the total 15 All-NBA players. So, yeah, there was definitely the best players were in the West. You know, like 1990 for sure. That's what you could say. That's true. But here's something to keep in mind. Cleveland in 1989 was a 57-win team, number 1 net rated team. In 1990, they were 42-40. So what happened to them? Here's what happened. Ron Harper, after 7 games, he got injured. So instead of just like, okay, well, we'll wait, you know, whatever, and he got traded to the Clippers. He played 28 games for the Clippers in the second half, you know, later on, the last third of the season for the Clippers. And Cleveland made one of the dumbest trades I've ever heard of. It's so stupid. Ron Harper was like a poor man's Michael Jordan. He had that level of skill, like driving to the basket. He wasn't as good a shooter. He was a really good defender. Not quite as good as Jordan defending it. But I'm just saying, like, the closest thing to Jordan, you know, yeah, you had Drexler and Wilkins were high flyer athletic players, but Ron Harper was a lot like Michael Jordan. He just wasn't as polished. He you know what I mean? He wasn't as fluid. You know, he didn't have all the footwork, and he just, you know, obviously he wasn't Michael Jordan, but he was decent, and he could hang with Jordan a little bit. And they get rid of him. They trade him along with a 2nd-round pick and 2 first-round picks. Ron Harper, 2 first-round picks and a 2nd-round pick for Reggie Williams and Danny Ferry. What a joke. I remember thinking, like, this Danny Ferry better be, like, you know, an all-star next year, all-NBA the year after that, because this is looking like not a good trade. And it wasn't. It was a horrible trade. You got rid of Ron Harper, you idiots. You already got rid of Kevin Johnson for peanuts. Now you're getting rid of Ron Harper. You guys, they were just so rich with talent, they didn't know what to do with it. They just gave it away, basically. Idiots. But anyway, in the same season, Brad Daugherty missed half the season. He missed 41 games. Larry Nance missed 20 games. So you add all that up, and that means Cleveland obviously took a big step back. They were 15 games worse than they were the year before, which actually, all things considered, wasn't that bad. But, you know, you lose your all-star center for half the year. You lose your all-defensive power forward Larry Nance, misses a quarter of the season. And then your starting 2-guard, your high scorer, your team's leading scorer, basically missed the entire season. You got virtually nothing back on that return. I mean, what a joke. But anyway, so they went down to 42. There was only 4 of the 13 teams in the East were under 500. So that means the other 9 were 500 or better. That's what I'm saying. Like, there might not have been like a bunch of top-heavy teams like Philly and Boston in the 80s, but they didn't have a bunch of bums either. Only 4 teams out of the 13 were under 500. So you didn't have a lot of easy wins. That you just didn't. In 91, the top 4 teams, Chicago 61 wins, Boston 56, Detroit 50, Milwaukee 48. So you're getting a little more top-heavy here with really the Bulls and Boston. As far as the All-NBA, you got Barkley and Jordan, first team, Ewing and Dominique, second team, Bernard King and Joe Dumars, third team. You have 6 of the 15 players. Again, the West has, you know, better top-level players. No doubt about it. Okay, but key injuries in 91. Larry Bird missed 22 games. That's a little more than a quarter of the season. Kevin McHale missed 14 games. So this is a 56-win team that, if you factor that in, they're probably winning over 60 games. And Bird got hurt during, you know, in the playoffs as well. So it kind of derailed that. The Bulls avoided, you know, a really good Boston team, which that would have been a really good conference finals. I don't know who I would have picked. I don't know. It would have been close. But Detroit, the 2-time defending champion and favorite to win it in 91, according to Vegas odds, they won 50 games, in large part due to the fact that Isaiah Thomas missed 34 games. So that's a lot. That's a little more than a third of the season. That's a lot of games to miss. So that, again, affects the record and the team as a whole. I know these fools on TV like say, oh, the Pistons got old. No, they really didn't. And they went 9 games backwards. That's true. Isaiah missed 34 games, but they also introduced flagrant fouls. That had a lot to do with kind of, neutering the Pistons' effectiveness in the paint and stuff. They could no longer go in and clothesline people with, impunity and just get a personal foul. That was no longer the case. Okay, so also, Mark Price for Cleveland missed 66 games, over 3/4 of the season. Hot Rod Williams, their starting small forward, missed 39 games, half the year. So they slid down to being a 33-win team. So again, when you're missing these level of players for this amount of time, yeah, it's going to weaken the East a bit. But the players were there, they just got hurt. And then in 91, 6 of the 13 teams were under 500. Also in 91, Charles Barkley missed 15 games. Johnny Dawkins, their starting point guard, missed 78 games, basically the whole year. And they were a 44-38 team. I mean, if these guys are there for, 80-plus games, I believe Philly would have been, a 50-win team or more. They would have been decent. But that's just not what happened. And yeah, I agree. The early 90s, the East was a little weak. It was definitely weaker compared to the West. But to say it was just like flat out weak, that's not really true. All right, in 92, Chicago 67-win team, they're the number 1. Cleveland 57. Then you got the Knicks and Boston were both 51-win teams. Now this is a weird year where you're either good or you're bad. That's just kind of how it was in 92. First, the All-NBA's first team was Michael Jordan, was the only first teamer from the East. Second team, you had Pippen, Barkley, Ewing. Third team, you had Kevin Willis. You had Mark Price. You had Brad Daugherty. You had 8 of the 15 All-NBA players are in the East. Well, that's more than half. I think you would agree with that. And as far as serious injuries go, Dominique Wilkins missed 40 games. Okay? That's going to hurt right there. I mean, Boston, a 51-win team, which would have been more like a 60-win team in 92. But they had serious injuries. Bird missed 37 games. Now, this is last year, but still a very effective player. Missed 37 games. McHale missed 26. D. Brown, their starting point guard, missed 51 games. Well, that's a lot of games to miss. And this is a team that won 51 games despite that. I think they would have been closer to a 60-win team, probably going to grab the 2 seed. And anyway, so there was 8 of the 14 teams were under 500. So that's more than half. Like I said, either you were good or you were bad. However, there was only 1 team under 25 wins. So the West had 3 teams under 25 wins. So I would say that, the East wasn't just total garbage. They just didn't have a bunch of, 60-win teams and whatnot like that. But it was very more competitive now. It's not as top-heavy as the 80s. Some people like that. But it's like you're only going to win if you're one of a handful of teams. I mean, anyway. Okay, 1993. The Knicks are now the number 1 team with 60 wins. The Bulls, 57. Cleveland, 54. And Boston, 48. Which really isn't bad for Boston considering Larry Bird retired. And this is Kevin McHale's last season. So for All-NBAs, you got Mark Price, first team All-NBA. Michael Jordan, first team All-NBA. Second team All-NBA, you got Larry Johnson, Dominique Wilkins, Drazen, he was third team. You have a total of 4 players. Patrick Ewing was one of them. 4 players from the East, second team All-NBA. Third team All-NBA, that's when you had Drazen Petrovic, Scottie Pippen, Derek Coleman. So all told in 93, you had 9 of the 15 All-NBA players were in the East. So again, the majority of the top level players are in the East. So what do we mean when we say it's weak? Because again, I'm showing back-to-back seasons here that there's more All-NBA players in the East than there is in the West. All right, now injuries. Every year there's some. Wasn't a ton in 93. Brad Daugherty missed 11 games. Not a huge deal, but I think they might have won a little more than 54 games. Dominique Wilkins missed 11 games also. And Kenny Anderson for the Nets missed 27 games, which I think may have affected some things because they had a pretty good team. Between Kenny Anderson and Drazen Petrovic and Derek Coleman, they had a nice little core of players there. But Anderson was always hurt all the time. And they only had 5 of the 14 teams in the East were under 500. So that's that's decent. It's not a great conference. It's not a bad one. It's just decent. Now you want to talk about a bad conference? Here you go. In 94, the best team was Atlanta. Atlanta and the Knicks won 57 games. The Bulls won 55. Orlando 50. That's your top 4 teams in the East. All right. The All-NBAs. It's a pretty short list. Scottie Pippen was first team. Mark Price, Derek Coleman were second team. And Shaq was third team. That's it. 4 of the 15 All-NBA players were in the East. That's not great. The injuries. Doc Rivers for the Knicks missed 63 games, including the playoffs. And I got to think that had to have a little bit of an effect on things. Larry Johnson missed 37 games, and Alonzo Mourning missed 22 games. That's why Charlotte was a mere 500 team, where I think they actually could have been, much better than that. Now, here's the really interesting part. The players who got injured and then retired during the season, Isaiah Thomas, Larry Nance, Brad Daugherty, those 3 players got injured in the season and retired right on the spot, never to play another game. So also in 94, the players who got traded to the other conference, Dominique Wilkins got traded for Danny Manning. You're the number 1 seed. You trade away Dominique Wilkins. Okay. Indiana trades Detlef Schrempf for Derek McKee. Detroit trades Dennis Rodman for Sean Elliott. So if you were building a team, would you trade Dominique Wilkins, Detlef Schrempf, and Dennis Rodman for Sean Elliott, Derek McKee, and Danny Manning? You'd have to be a fool, right? Well, that's what happened. So you got 3 good players from the East are now in the West. So, yeah, it did weaken them temporarily. And you had 2 young, budding stars died in the offseason. Drazen Petrovic and Reggie Lewis. And, it was horrible. And, of course, Kevin McHale died after the 93 season. But you take all this into account, and, that led to a weakened conference. Now, Cleveland in 94, I think they were like a 47-win team, something like that. And they played the Bulls, who were the 3 seed in the first round. Well, not only did Brad Daugherty and Larry Nance get hurt, and Larry Nance missed 33 games. Brad Daugherty missed 50 games. Not only that, but even the players that were backing him up, like Tyrone Hill, missed 25 games. That's a lot of injuries and game missing and all that. And it did weaken the East. It was weak. 5 of the 14 teams were under 500, which, isn't terrible. It's okay. But like I said, only 4 of the 15 All-NBA players are from the East. And, I did a video on this not long ago about how the media does not want to tell you the truth about the 94 Bulls. Not only were all these injuries and retirements and deaths taking place, but did you know that 4 of the top 8 players in minutes played on the Bulls in the playoffs in 1994 all acquired right before? Pete Myers, Steve Kerr, Tony Kukoc, and Luke Longley. 4 of their top 8 minutes played came in for the 94 season. Longley actually during the 94 season. But that's half your top 8 players. Half your team, basically. So anybody who thinks that the 94 Bulls were just the 93 Bulls minus Jordan, that's just not what happened. And I'm just so tired of people saying that. And then you factor in everything that happened in the East here, all these injuries, retirements, all this stuff. I mean, it affected a lot. It really did. I mean, Atlanta was a 57-win team. They weren't great necessarily, but they were rolling. They really were. With Mookie Blaylock and Dominique and Kevin Willis, they were doing good. But they traded away Dominique, I think because he wanted to trade, something like that, but it screwed their season up. But anyway, 1995, Orlando 57 wins, New York 55 wins, Indiana 52, and Charlotte 50. So again, that's not bad. That's okay, average, I guess you could say. But again, the best players in the NBA were in the West. In the East, the All-NBA players, you had Pippen and Penny were first-team All-NBA. Shaq was second-team All-NBA. And Reggie Miller was third. That's it. 4 players. And 2 of them were on one team, Orlando. So when Orlando has 2 All-NBA players on the same team, and they got the number 1 seed, does anybody ever give Shaq a bunch of crap for not winning it? People say that, oh, well, the Bulls had, 2 All-NBA players on the same team, but they won every time. As you can see, Orlando had the same situation. They didn't. They had a first team and a second team, just like the Bulls did a lot of years. Like right here, MJ first, Pippen second. I mean, what do you want me to say? I mean, Anyway, so in 95, the big injuries were Charles Oakley missed 32 games, Mark Price missed 34 games, Dino Raja missed 16. The reason why that's significant is Boston was a 48-win team. They were almost one of the top 4. I don't know if that's missing the 16 games would have affected anything, but it was an injury. So half the teams in 95 were under 500. 7 of the teams were 35 wins or less. So again, the East in these couple years, either you're good or you're bad, because there's not really much middle ground there. All right, 96. The Bulls, 72-win team, Orlando 60, Indiana 52, and then New York and Cleveland together is a 47-win team. Your first team All-NBAs are Penny, Jordan, and Pippen. Grant Hill's second team, you got Juwan Howard, Shaq, Reggie Miller third. That's 7 of your top 15 in the NBA, so just under half. But the top 3 teams Vegas picked to win, the best odds to win it, Chicago was number 1, Orlando number 2, and Indiana number 3, right here. Not the West. All 3 were in the East. So the big injuries were Shaq missed 28 games with Horace Grant missing 19. You got to think Orlando might have been like a 65-win team, 68-win team. I mean, they were a very good team. Charles Oakley missed 29 games. Rick Smits missed 19, which I think, may have affected a little bit. Smits was one of the best, 10 centers in the NBA. But 6 of the 15 teams were under 500. Well, out west, 7 of the 14 were under 500. Half the teams in the West were under 500. We're only 40% in the East were under 500. 97, the Bulls 69 wins, Miami 61, New York 57, Atlanta 54. Then you got your 5th and 6th seeds won 54 games, Detroit and Charlotte. Your All-NBA players, 3 first-teamers in the East, Grant Hill, Jordan, Tim Hardaway. Second team, you got Pippen, Glenn Rice, Ewing. Third team, you got Vin Baker, Anthony Mason, Penny Hardaway. 9 of the 15 All-NBA players are in the East. Again, that's 60%, more than half. The best players are in the East. Typically was the case, except for the very early 90s and those 2 years in 94, 95. So the big injuries were Rick Smits missed 30 games, Derek McKee missed 32 games. That kind of what knocked Indiana out of it. When you have these 6 teams ahead of you and you got those bad of injuries, that's going to affect things. Now for Miami, a 61-win team, Lonzo Mourning missed 16 games and Dan Marley missed 46 games. Got to think that would have affected things. And Orlando was a 47-win team, still formidable, even minus Shaq. People think like, oh, that's Shaq. They weren't finished. The problem was, in 97, the first year without Shaq, Penny missed 23 games, Horace Grant missed 15. Dennis Scott missed 16. Nick Anderson missed 19. I think Ronnie Cycling missed like 10 or 12. They never had real continuity, but the talent was there. If those guys all would have played 80-plus games, I'm telling you, they would have been a top 3 or 4 team in the East in 97. 6 of the 15 teams are under 500, but again, there's 8 of the 14 out west that are under 500. So what are we saying? We mean better, because there was more bad teams out west than there was in the East, especially in the second half of the 90s. 98, Chicago, 62 wins, Indiana, 58, Miami, 55. You got Charlotte with 51, Atlanta with 50. That's top 5 teams, actually. First team All-NBA. The only one the East had was Jordan. In second team, you had Grant Hill, Tim Hardaway, Rod Strickland. And then for third team, you had Pippen, Glenn Rice, Reggie Miller, Mutombo for third team. So that's 8 out of 15. Again, more than half of the top 15 players are in the East. The key injuries, Alonzo Mourning missed 24 games, Jamal Mashburn 34. That really prevented Miami from getting that 2 seed against Indiana. Patrick Ewing missed 56 games, which took them out of it, basically. And Penny missed 63 games. That shot it for Orlando. They were done. 5 of the 15 teams were under 500. Again, that's really good. Only 1 team was under 31 wins in 98 for the East. How about the West? They had 6 teams under 31 wins. So again, when you say better, I don't know what you're talking about, because going by all NBA or under 500 teams, the East might have actually been a little better than the West. The West was very top heavy, especially in the last half. The early years, yes, the West was better. The first 90, 91, 92, absolutely. All right, 99, Jordan retired. Rodman, I think, is now on the Lakers, and Pippen is in Houston. So that's all broken up. The best teams in the East, it's a 50-game season. Miami, Orlando, and Indiana are 33 and 17, okay? They're all tied for the best record. Atlanta was 31 and 19. And something about that Atlanta team, I'm pretty sure they allowed the least points per game ever was that 99 Atlanta team. I think that's right. I could be wrong, but I think that's right. If you want to fact check me, that'd be great. All right, all NBAs. Here we go. Right back to it again. When Jordan leaves, all the best players seem to go with him. Because the first team All-NBA, you had Alonzo Mourning and Allen Iverson. Second team, you had Grant Hill and Tim Hardaway. That's it. 4 out of the 15 players are in the East. The other 11, out West. So obviously the shift was on in 99, and it didn't let go, really, ever. For the last 25 years, the West has been the better conference. It's been nuts. But the key injuries, Jamal Mashburn missed 26 games, and I gotta figure that would have at least helped Miami maybe get home court advantage throughout, even though they pretty much choked. I think that was the injury, the suspension series against the Knicks, whatever. But anyway, Patrick Ewing missed 12, Sprewell missed 13, and they might have avoided being the 8th seed, but probably wouldn't have done too much more. Steve Smith missed 14 games. So that might have helped Atlanta get into this pack with these 3. That Smith played, 80 or all 82 or whatever. But we don't know. It's pure speculation, but it's worth mentioning. And again, 6 of the 15 teams were under 500. But you got to remember, this was a strike-shortened 50-game season. So you're not going to have as many teams under 500 as easily. A lot of these teams are going to be closer to 500 and everything. So anyway, that's all I got for this video. I hope that this broke it down by the top teams, who the all NBA players were in the East, who the key injuries were that helped contribute to some of this stuff, and also the under 500 teams. When you take it all into account, you look at the whole decade of the 90s and make a blanket statement to say the 90s East was weak, it's inaccurate. That's not true. If you want to say the early parts of it was a little weak, I agree. If you want to say the 94-95 seasons, the best players because of injuries and retirements and deaths and all that were a little weak, I can agree with you there. You want to say 99 got weak, I can agree with that. But the 96 to 98, absolutely not. That was a strong conference in these 3 years. And then I would say from 92 to 93, they were average. But 90-91, yeah, maybe they were a little bit weak. Okay, I would say that, but not as far as under 500 teams. There wasn't a lot of bad teams. In 92, yes, that's the only year I would say there was actually bad teams in the East. But for the most part, there was competitive teams. It was not this weak conference these people are saying. You compare this to the 2000s or the 2010s. Come back and tell me what you think. You know what I mean? There's years where they had like 3 players all NBA, from the East. It was a joke. So anyway, that's all I got for this video. I wanted to go in depth on the 90s East, and hopefully you feel like I've done that, because this stuff drives me crazy sometimes. It really does. And it's just not true. A blanket statement, you need context with this stuff. I hate blanket statements, and I wish people would just tell the truth a little more. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please hit the like button. Let me know in the comments if you think there's something I missed, overlooked, what have you. That's it. Until next time.